I want to start by saying that a few days ago, on January 27th, it was the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And on that day, we used a quote which was famously rephrased by Winston Churchill in 1948. Those who fail to learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. In the discussion on nationalism, we really should look back and learn from history, and we don't really have to look very far. And nationalism as a concept is very contested. It doesn't have any clear definition that's agreed upon by experts. What makes it even more complicated is that it will have different expressions depending on the country or the nation in question. Polish nationalism will look different from American nationalism, which will look different again from Scottish nationalism. So how do we identify nationalism, and what does it have to do with Christianity? Dictionary.com, which I used this time because I needed something simple, defines nationalism as the policy or doctrine of asserting the interests of one's own nation, viewed as separate from the interests of other nations or common interests of all nations. In short, nationalism is a kind of excessive, aggressive patriotism. And many people ask why nationalism is something that we should worry about. Isn't being proud of one's nation a positive thing? It's true, it really can be. But in modern history, fascist regimes have used and abused the concept of nationalism, linking it to superiority, especially in the context of ethnicity and religion. In this modern understanding of nationalism, patriots became those who happen to agree with you or look like you, and traitors, those who do not. I'm guessing this sounds familiar to some of you. One of the basic propositions of nationalism is that loyalty to the nation overrides all other loyalties. As followers of Jesus, our identity is in him above all else. Before we are Scottish or Romanian or American or Norwegian, we are members of the global church. And while the world is divided by languages and cultures and politics, we are called to be one in him. So then how can we as Christians be nationalists when it seems like Christianity is in itself antithetical to the very core principles of nationalism? So if Christianity and nationalism directly contradict each other, how is Christian nationalism even a thing that we're talking about? So religious nationalism seeks to merge a religious identity with the national identity. Modern examples of this can be found all over the world, with Hindu nationalism in India, Buddhist nationalism in Myanmar, and Catholic nationalism in Poland, being just a few examples. In merging religious identity with national identity, the religious affiliation and expression becomes an expression of national identity. And the celebration of an adherence to the religion becomes a celebration of an adherence to the nation, and vice versa. And this offers the religion in question a favorable position in the country with more privileges and rights than any other religion, if, of course, other religions are allowed to exist, which is many times not the case. This stands in direct opposition to our idea of the Western liberal democracy and the concept of religious freedom. And what's so interesting is that Christian nationalists will often justify their approach as a way to preserve and protect exactly that, religious freedom. Studies show that while our societies are becoming more and more secular, Christian nationalism is growing. It seems as if Christian nationalism grows stronger when Christians sense that their powerful and privileged position in society is threatened. So this would mean that Christian nationalism is rooted in a place of fear. Meanwhile, the Bible teaches us that we should do all things out of love, and that perfect love will drive out all fear. So we have to ask ourselves, when did using violence and threats and coercion ever become a good way to further the kingdom of God? Didn't Jesus show us that change must happen from the inside out? And I'm aware that people probably have very honorable reasons for getting into Christian nationalism, although they would probably not acknowledge that that's what they're doing. Do the ends really justify the means? And can we afford to sacrifice democracy and human rights in a pursuit of justice? I promised I would try to be more practical, so I'm going to offer some concrete examples of modern expressions of Christian nationalism, particularly in Europe. In Hungary, President Orban has cleverly sought to consolidate authoritarian rule through anti-refugee populism, framed as a rescue of the Christian nation from Muslim invasion. In effect, Hungary has become the first ever non-democratic country in the EU. In Poland, the conservative government recently managed to secure re-election based on a platform of sacred tradition. The government has followed through with their promises, instituting LGBTQ-free zones and criminalizing abortion. And while I am personally pro-life in the broadest sense of the word, I cannot support the way Christians are using a single issue to gain political power. In Poland, it has created enormous tensions, pitting the religious right against more liberal-minded. Many gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender Poles have recently emigrated to escape persecution. I know that some Christians will see this as a victory, but we have to ask ourselves, is any of this helping to promote the good news of the gospel? Aren't we just engaging in culture wars and fighting for our own rights and opinions? And I genuinely hope this will be received as it is intended. It's a genuine question from someone who is genuinely concerned. In Italy and Austria, political leaders have used more or less explicit Catholic symbols in order to foster anti-Muslim Christian tribalism. It was based on these types of arguments that Mr. Salvini, in his role as Italian Minister of Interior, implemented an anti-immigration policy that barred humanitarian rescue ships from Italian ports. Last year, 979 migrants died in their attempts to cross the Mediterranean. And this is just the official number. Between 2014 and 2018, it is estimated that about 12,000 people who drowned were never found. And these statistics are taken from the official statista.com database. Again, we must ask ourselves, how is this furthering the kingdom of God? In France and the Netherlands, right-wing populists like Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders resort to language that present Judeo-Christianity as a pillar of the European Enlightenment and civilization. Marine Le Pen and her party, the National Front, has certainly had an ambivalent relationship to the church. Still, Le Pen invokes the heritage of the church to explain the core of her nation's identity. Rogers Brubaker, a sociologist at the University of California in Los Angeles, states that Le Pen's brand of Christianity as a form of identity has emerged in response to a widespread Muslim immigration into the country over the last 10 to 15 years. In her view, we are Christians, Brubaker said, precisely because they are Muslims. Otherwise, we are not Christian in any substantive sense. And using this rhetoric, Marie Le Pen has successfully managed to attract more religious voters, particularly Catholics. And what all of these examples have in common, I could bring out more, but we don't have time. What they have in common is that they use religious symbols and language in order to attract and mobilize Christian voters and legitimize their own agendas. Most often by painting a picture of an easily identifiable external threat to their national Christian identity and heritage. It could be Muslim immigrants or Western liberal ideas, and promising to protect their followers from this threat. As we know from history, nothing is more effective in mobilizing the masses than using fear to unite the people against the common external enemy. Our identity in Jesus transcends all other worldly affiliations. He called us to abandon everything and follow him. Jesus refused to be made ruler or king in a worldly sense, even if that is what his disciples wanted. Instead, he continuously talked about the kingdom of God, not as a physical geographic location, but as something belonging to those who accept and follow him. The kingdom of God is in our salvation, by him and through him. The kingdom of God is spread by sharing the gospel, the good news, not by establishing dominion on earth and controlling and oppressing everyone who disagrees with us. Throughout history, we know this approach has been tested and tried with terrible results. More importantly, it's not the way of Jesus. So in short, nationalism and Christianity should not have anything to do with one another. History and current events have taught us that religious nationalism leads to oppression and persecution, even genocide of certain groups for the benefit of others. It has everything to do with fear and power and othering, and nothing at all to do with the gospel. And I would end by saying this: by all means, please be proud of your country and your nation, but not at all cost. Don't forget that if you are a Christian, your allegiance is first and foremost belonging to Jesus of Nazareth and his global church. And as Paul so nicely put it in Colossians 3:11, here there is no Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all.